Hi, my name is Benedict. This video is not part of the current series I'm doing. This is actually on its own. I want to introduce, or perhaps more accurately reintroduce you to a synthesizer called Surge. The reason I say reintroduce is I was actually on the beta team for Surge 10, 15 years ago when it was first being developed. It came out of a fellow called Claes. Before this, he'd had a very cool sample synthesizer called Short Circuit. It's only a VST2 now. There's a Short Circuit 2, but I don't think that's the way to go. But Short Circuit 1 was a VST2, and it had quite a different approach. The thing kind of looked like a spreadsheet. But if you were really into sound design, it was actually a pretty lovely unit to use. It had a very nice character. And then he said, hey, I'm gonna produce this thing. So I said, yep, okay, I'll be on board. Now I'm gonna be real honest. At the time, I wasn't bowled over by Surge. Not only was it, for its time, a little kooky, and I'm open to kooky, but I found it kooky. Some of the kookiness is still there, but I'm going to show you that it's not a problem, especially with the other things you're going to learn. And I wasn't bowled over with its sound. But the problem was, in that case, it was my problem. At that time, I thought that every synthesizer was supposed to sound like a Jupiter 8 or a Moog Modular, and if it didn't sound like that, I was kind of not interested, with the possible exception of if it sounded like a Casio CZ. But even there, I was constantly trying to make my CZ sound like one of the aforementioned. Now, the developer went off to work for somebody else. Apparently that's Bitwig. Good on him, good play. They're doing some very cool work. And he's popped this into the open source community. So a fully fledged, very interesting synth is now available open source. Bottom line that means is you can actually get it for $0. I would encourage you, if you're getting it, especially at $0, to look to return something to the community. So this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm returning to the community. The community being that I'm letting other people know that this actually immensely cool instrument exists. So let's take a walk through it. At the moment, we're looking at the website. It's got a dramatic look. If you come into this assuming that all instruments have to look like what they've looked like in the last few years, you're probably going to struggle with it. But if you come in as a sound designer and you're looking for the logic of what can I create, how can I create it, you're going to get your head around it. There are a couple of things that are going to be like, oh, that's not how we normally do it, but if you're smart, you're going to see the logic to it. You can hear some things that other people have done with it, and I will show you something that I've done with it, and I'm delighted with it. So, being given away, freebie, general specs. It's a vaguely modular synth with a massive number of presets, possibly some of which I made way back when. I really don't remember. But I know Claes was making a lot, and I was working on some. I just, over that time, I can't remember my own. It's subtractive hybrid. What I will say is think of this as a digital synth. Now, you can bend its will to doing analogy type things, but its real strength is in acknowledging that it's actually a very digital synth. And the thing that I actually love about it is that it is that. I was actually out and I found this because I was out sort of thinking, yeah, I think I want something else, and tried a few of the usual suspects and like, yeah. And then I stumbled on this, and it's like, oh, there's a blast from the past. Went over, had a look, had a play, and it's like, that's just the sound I'm looking for. I'll explain the sound a bit better later. So what you get, 3 oscillators per voice. But wait, there's more. Each patch has the ability to have an A and a B version, which are capable of being completely separate from each other. So you can actually be running a 6 oscillator per voice. You can split them across the keyboard, you can A-B them, you can layer them, all within the one thing. 8 algorithms. Classic, which is just morphable between a sawtooth and a square wave, but rather cool. a sine wave, which just oddly enough is a sine wave. Wave table, so there are a whole pile of wave tables that have been built. Window, I don't quite know what that means, but you can get cool sounds from it. FM2, FM3, as it explains down here, they consist of a carrier and 2 modulators or 3 modulators. So that means it's a 3 or a 4 operator, FM being DX7 style synth. Cool. Does it sound exactly like them? I don't think so. But you don't need that. If you're obsessed with having DX7 sounds, there's one way to get them, and that's a DX7. I know some of you wiseacres are going to tell me, oh, get Dexed or something. Yeah, sure, go for it if you want. But DX7 is the only way to get that real sound because of the DAC, the digital audio converter. And no, whacking some kind of bit crusher will not turn another synth into sounding like a DX7 or a Casio CZ, because I spent a lot of time trying to work out how to make things sound like a real CZ by bit crushing and this, that, and the other. It doesn't bloody well work. But nonetheless, FM is there, and FM is cool, in part because of how this sounds. A lot of them you can use up to, not every case gives you all of this, but up to a 16 voice unison. If you like things to be super ridiculous, you've got that option. Every patch, no wonder the topography, you can actually, and we'll look at this later, get into oscillator FM and ring modulation. So you can make everything sound nasty if you want, winning. But it does it quite nicely. Most strictly band limit, blah, 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 who cares? Has a noise generator. Now this is kind of cool. The noise generator has the ability for you to actually filter the color. So it can go from quite dark to completely blue. Filter block. There's a pair of them and one an envelope generator between. Initially you might think, geez, that's not much, but we'll solve that. The filter has the ability to have a feedback loop, which I'll show you later. You can't see it here. There are a whole pile of algorithms, low passes of different types, high passes of different types, band passes, band notches. That one I haven't done the reading on, so I don't really know what it does. And it's a sample and hold, but I don't know what the purpose of that is. Again, I haven't gone through everything in here. The manual's not 100% accurate. They need somebody to write a new manual, because at the moment the manual's for the original version. And there have been some little alterations made. But the manual probably will cover that quite well. But my point of view is, while I love manuals, a device should show itself for what it is relatively easily. But this is one you probably do want to read the manual after a little bit. Each filter type has several variations. So LP12 has 3 variations. So what that will mean is that when we choose this, you'll end up with a little number over here. Again, it's odd. It's kind of not as clear as the way we do things now. But remember, this is 15 to 20 years ago that this was designed. Get used to its quirks. Getting the thing for free. Well, hopefully not for free, because you'll put something back out into the community to let other people know that this exists. Because quite honestly, if people get into this, I can see this being like the digital equivalent of Synth 1. The synth that was out there for free, and it sort of went everywhere. Everyone was like, yeah, this is the synth. And it was a good device. Apparently a clone of Reason's Subtractor, which was funny because lots of the people who garbaged Subtractor would then be like, Synth 1. It's like, grow up. There is modulation system. The modulation system is quite ahead of its time. It does, to some extent, mean that you've got to carry it in your head. So I'll show you how that works. It is pretty cool, but sometimes doesn't work the way you think it's going to work. But once you understand how it works, it's very logical. Klaus, the developer, was very, very logical. So there's common sense in everything that's done, even if he does it apparently upside down. And then you've got a pretty complex effects system. So the A thing can run through a couple of inserts. They can be selectively sent to some send and return effects. They then go through a couple of master effects, and they all share the same algorithms. Some of them are a little unusual in their setup or the way they work, but a lot of them are actually really very nice. So brilliant. They are open for contributors. So as I've said, if you're picking this thing up for no dollars, please put something back into the community, even if only to show the rest of the world that you've made cool things with this thing, to make other people think, hey, this is a cool thing to pick up. Remember, always pay back or pay forward. If you're not paying, you're stealing. So there's a lot of community stuff. I have talked to the guys, and generally they're pretty friendly. So let's go have a look-see. In Reason, as we all know, I live in Reason. So you'll find it under Vember Audio. Vember is the original developer name. When you open it up, it's going to open up this size. That seems kind of small by modern standards, but do not let yourself become disheartened. We'll pop on the keep open, so it stays open. We can zoom 100, 125, 150. We can go bigger than my screen. If I try and go bigger than my screen, it'll actually automatically say that's as big as I can let you be. It's pretty well thought through. You can mess around with various things. We'll go up to this. It still allows me to access the rest of the world if I need it. That's my default. You can also set to a default. So I can say, okay, this time I want to run at this. Maybe we will. Nice and big. Ooh, except... There we go. Now it's not cut off. So what have we got? Remember, we've got these two scenes. So essentially two completely different synthesizers, separate from each other, except they're in the one box, and controlled by the same set of nodes, A and B Cs. So you can be running two synthesizers, two complete sounds, layered, or you can split them. So that's pretty cool. It has an impressive amount of potential polyphony. Actually, I don't know where it goes to. I think 32 is where it... Oh no, it seems to offer more. Oh, 64. Some things move sideways, some things move up and down. You just kind of work it out as you go. But 64 voices in potential is huge. I haven't sat here trying to work out how many I can do before I kill my i7, but nonetheless, it's plenty. Most things, if you move them, they will show you their value. There isn't actually a type in, so you can't say, oh, I want to do that. If you double click them, they'll go back home. If you control click them, they will go back home. If you shift click them, they don't seem to do anything at all. If you right click them, they will then give you information. They'll tell you what they are, they'll tell you what their current value is. Some of them will give you extra options to be able to do things. So let's see what extend range is. That one's a new one on me. So that'll go up to 84. I think that is semitones. Again, you'd have to read the manual. It's a long bloody way, either way. Default range is ±7, which is generally enough because you've got your octaves here as well. You can assign MIDI controllers, but this is, like in Reason, it becomes per setup. So if you've got 3 or 4 of these running in the one piece and you've assigned a MIDI controller to, let's say we can assign mod wheel to this, then the other instruments will do it too. So good and a workable system, but just be aware, and this is not the fault of the synth, but just be aware that you probably want to do your modulation on board rather than getting into this. But it's there, and that was pretty forward for its time. So buzzy sound. Some oscillators will sound quite... Is it this one? I know one of them sounds quite... Yep, there. Now, if you're one of those people who can't live with that kind of quirk, move along. But in reality, I will say to you, harden the fuck up. This is actually a great thing that it does this. The reason is that this is a quirk or a character of this instrument, and this instrument actually has a lovely sound. The reason, and if you've watched my CZ video that I did a week or so ago, and there's been quite a bit of talk around that, the reason the CZs actually sounded so lovable, or infuriating, both at once, was because of the digital audio conversion, the DAC, the thing that took the math and spat it back out for us to hear. It was a strange converter, like a strange set of numbers. By our standards, 12 bits, 40k. You wouldn't do it. It also had some cheap components around it because it was a really cheap synth. So as a result, you got a kind of grainy sound out of it. And these days people will tend to go, oh no, shocking, horrifying, you shouldn't have that. Then they'll have bit crushers. As I said to you, it doesn't work out the same. You don't get the same results. So this has a characterful sound, which you can either use to do your head in, and I'm going to say your stupid fault, or you can say, this is a beautiful thing about it. Like a DX7, as I said before, is not equaled. The only way to equal a DX7 is to get a DX7. And it turns out with the Casio CZ series, the only way to get a CZ that sounded like yours was to get yours. Because apparently from one model to another, one synth to another, you could put 3 or 4 CZ1000s in a room and they were likely to all sound a little different from one another. So that character, the graininess in the sound, you will actually find a blessing once you get it into a mix. If you sit there going, oh, but it's not perfect, you're just going to Roger yourself. Get this thing in a mix, and you're going to find that character actually carries it through a mix beautifully. And that's what I'm loving about this instrument, the sound, and the things you can do with it. So, basic. Oh, no, we've got to go back to classic. That's where we're at, classic. It's where some things have a few layers to them. So you've got classic, and then inside here you've got basic. So it's some things you've just got to remember. Once you've given it a few moments, you'll get around it. So morphable. Exactly what the logic of the morphing is, I would have to read in the manual, and hopefully it explains. Phase width is widths. So we're basically able to work our way around through almost every reasonable permutation of what you might find between a sawtooth and a square wave. Winning. We can then add in a sub. Change the width of the sub. So that's cool. So if I were to be doing myself a cover of Ultravox's Vienna, that beginning, the sounds, that pulse width modulation there, walked in the cold air, that's there, and it does a very nice job of it too, very nice job. You can sync. Cool. And then we've got unisons. I have actually used the unison a few times, and it's worked out very nicely. Some unisons just go straight to assuming that the only music in the world is trance supersaws. This one I've found is versatile, probably preferring this unison to that in Europa. That says quite a bit. We can re-trigger, so it starts the phase at the beginning. Every time we press a key, we'll turn that off, which makes it more like an analog synth where they kind of just start where they're at. Depends on the kind of sound that you want. If you're after that punchier SH 101 type sound, then put them into re-trigger. It'll give you tighter, punchier basses. But if you want that loose, mogy feel, leave the re-trigger off. Speaking of, you've got oscillator drift as well. I think it's quite simply oscillator tuning. Now, quite a lot of functions in this. It's a very digital synth, and this was very normal for its time because we needed to save processor cycles as much as possible. We did not have the fast machines we've got now. A lot of features won't do anything until you've released and re-triggered the note. As I said, very, very normal in early digital synths. So if you move a parameter and nothing happens, release your key and go again. Chances are you will then hear the difference. Some things are real-time, filters are real-time, all of that, but some controls don't really do anything until you re-trigger a note. It takes that and says, okay, now we're doing this thing. So if you go, this doesn't do anything, probably it's user error. Classic, wavetables. So wavetables, we can run through all the different types of wavetables we've got in there, sine octaves. Loud. Yeah, actually a lot of sounds in here are pretty loud. We'll put that back too. So that's getting into PPG, microwave kind of territory. Nice. Always nice to have those sorts of options. Triangles. Some of these don't do anything, but some of them do. This one I like. You know what that reminds me of? A CZ. Doesn't really sound like it, but that method of morphing from a sine to another shape. Cool. Do that without a filter, and you're in pure digital synth heaven, like classic synth. All kinds of generated shapes, sine quantized. Do that in Europa, you quantize the thing. So it's just giving you a whole lot of preset things. You can do to the wave. They are preset. This thing doesn't seem to load samples or anything like that, but I don't think it's a problem. You've got so many options in here. It's going to be quite some time before you wear things out. These ones. Rhythmic ones, I think, are designed to come alive once you're controlling things. He says here he's sampled certain things. Let's see what his harpsichord sounds like. No harpsichord I ever heard of. But then most people look at harpsichords very differently from the way I did because I grew up with them. But nonetheless, there are piano ones. So you probably need to put those under envelope or maybe LFO control, and you can do things. Again, we've got no need to fight. A lot of these you might want to put into a re-trigger mode. Wavetable, no, sorry, looking in the wrong place. It's easy, you get used to it after a while. Waldorf stuff. So this is PPG microwave stuff. How accurate these are, I do not know. But nonetheless, they are there. Microwave one.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Oh, it talks to me in German. Winning. So a lot of those sorts of things. There's a whole lot more things here. These are from a user. I don't remember whether I knew him or not. It's been a long time. Window. seems to have quite a lot of the same things, but it behaves differently. So I think by window it means they go through a windowing process. That's a DSP term for God knows what. Basically, we're going to fuck this sound up somehow for you, and you're going to love it. So it goes through these different processes. German chipmunks. What else could you ask for? We've got the ability to loosen them up. Chorus of German chipmunks, otherwise known as Tangerine Dream. Sine wave, as I said, it's just a sine wave, but you can then use that to get into FM. You can hear quite a bit of nastiness as you move, but that's true in any digital synth. And the fact that they haven't gone through, or the class didn't go through and alias all of these bad things out, is, I think, actually for me, it's a winning feature. And I'm hoping that there isn't a drive within the community to perfect the synth. Go off and make a Surge 2 if you want, or a whole other thing. Take the DSP and make some whole other thing and perfectify it by oversampling the buggery out of everything. But the fact that this is capable of doing what it does is, I think, very nice. So you can just grab a plain sine to do stuff with. We'll turn FM off, which means we're back to hearing one oscillator. FM2, these require a little bit of thinking, but then that's the nature of FM. We've got basic sine, which we have no control over, no reason why we would. We can just set its basic tuning here. Mod 1 amount. Mod 1 ratio. So that's 1 to 1, as in it's on the same octave. 2 is 2 to 1. So you get the full wave at about 30%, which means up here is getting into ugly tone. Now this is something that I've noticed quite a lot of modern FM synths will reduce the amount of ugly tone that you're offered. And while I get it, it's reducing what FM can do. If your FM only ever goes from there to there, that's much easier to work with if you're not after ugly tone sounds. But if necessary, I would say put a little button on there that says keep it pretty, go to town. But if you're concerned that, oh, everything I do just makes these ghastly sounds, just keep it on the bottom end of the modulation throw. Now, modulation is how you will change these things within the oscillator. It just gives you preset amounts, and it's then how you modulate them from somewhere else. So we can set let's just pull some volume off this. It's prone to being too loud. Gorgeous. Very DX7 type sound, and true DX7 type sound. Not that it's trying to be a DX7, it won't take DX patches or anything like that, but it's got that quite authentic sound because it's grainy. There's little done to make it sound lovely, which is good because as a result it sounds lovely. And that's just one overtone. We can get into a second one. Leave that one there. So they compound each other. That's just lovely. It really is lovely. Put a few effects on that. We're in pretty time. And we can change our phase. And then get the thing to feed back onto itself. Really nice. And then you've got the same thing again in an FM3, which you lose your phase thing, but you've got one carrier and 3 modulators. So that's a 4 operator DX7 style oscillator. Just got one of them, got 2 and 3 with the ability to FM them to each other. If you got your head around that, you realize you've got a very powerful FM synth in here. Phase distortion FM synth in here. Really cool. Wrong one. Probably have to read the manual on this fella to work out how these things are supposed to work with each other. But you've got a very versatile noise oscillator. It's not a smooth noise. It's a very digital, here I've got an oscillator and I've messed it up so bad. You've got a very crunchy noise as a general rule of thumb. But don't matter, because whilst we're thinking noise, we've got this fella here. So it's got an inbuilt set of high-low pass filters built into it, and you can change the color of the noise. So I made a cool sound, an explosion sound, by combining those two styles of noise together. So best of both worlds. Some digital synths were locked into the only noise being the kind of ugly grainy stuff, which is great for explosions. It's nothing like it. You can combine the two and end up with nice sounds. So noise, there's audio input. Have not tried this yet. Synth will take in external audio and then you can do stuff to it. Don't really know what's going to happen. I'll let you play with that. You know, it's putting audios through other synths is not a thing that's ever really floated my boat that much. So let's go back to here. We'll go back to sine to saw. Now look at these little hooks up top. You've got a thing over here that says you can be warm, neutral, or bright. Sometimes you can see it clearer than others. That much better. Basically what this does is it doesn't change the tone of the whole instrument as you might think. It seems to change the oscillator. So some oscillators, when you're looking at them, maybe it'll show it here. No, it's not showing it. But I have noticed that sometimes you can see that the little pointy bits on top will actually become more pronounced as you go bright and less pronounced as you go warm. So it's altering the brightness or harshness of the core oscillator sound. Does it make much difference? I'm not sure. Obviously it would. It's probably more useful when you're running it as a pure digital synth, as in not using the filters at all. That's my guess. Play with it, don't knock yourself out. Let's go back to a sawtooth. Nice, cool, grainy sound again. That's that nice digital sort of sound. We can get into oscillator drift. I think it's relatively subtle. I have noticed sometimes where you can hear it there. But I did notice once where I had that, I'd been playing with it, I had it up at 100, and then I'm wondering, where's this thing out of tune? Where did it? And then I found it. So, but it's reasonably subtle. So from time to time, you might want to turn it up a little bit more if you're looking for. But as far as I'm aware, all it does is drift the tuning on each note on. It doesn't drift the whole synth. But to be honest, very few synths drift the whole synth. You can then take your whole scene and change its pitch. So we can change our pitch here and here at the same time. So just be aware you can achieve the same result in a couple of different places, which is nice and powerful, but if you don't have the overview, as I just said to you, you can get lost. But don't blame the synth. We've got the ability to modulate the pitch. So if you're wanting to do just a simple vibrato to your then you're probably better off doing it here than here. Because if you're running separate oscillators, then you've got to do it twice. However, if you want to assign different LFOs to each oscillator, or the same LFO with different amounts, which can sound really nice. If you want to try that, go have a look at my space string, because that's what that specializes in doing. Even just different amounts, so this much on one oscillator, that much on the other. The fact that they're different levels means that they sound just that little bit thicker. So there's a lot of versatility there in how you modulate things. Portamento. You've got various modes. I haven't spent much time with them. I rarely these days put a synth in mono unless I'm really looking for that line of the mini Moog solo type thing, where I'm doing an orchestral type instrument that might be monophonic. Flute's only able to play one note at a time. Sorry, off to the side. I will still run it as a polyphonic. So portamento, cool, it's there. There's a mixer. It's possible to have all three of your oscillators running at once. Now, some things, there's a lot of throw in the switches, so shift click, and you've got to learn how they work. As I said, a lot of them kind of work sideways, because they are sideways, so they're skeuomorphic. Straight, take three oscillators, detune them, throw them out. It does that. We'll turn them spellers back off. You can then also take combinations of oscillators, and they're already ring modulated for you. 2. You can turn off key tracking. So good for belly and otherwise clangorous and unpleasant sounds. But a little bit of this works very, very nicely in what's otherwise meant to be a pretty patch. So don't ignore those ring mod options, because you can end up with some really lovely sounding results. Let's turn this on. Yeah, how fat that oscillator is. So the ring mods add a lot of extra harmonics. nice noise I showed you before. You've got an overall gain for everything. You can make it loud. You can run some really insane levels in this thing if you are so desirous. Then we've got filters. We'll go into filters. You've got various kinds of filter routings. Again, don't fully understand them. Do need to read the manual on these. You can run through them, and they are, as such, self-explanatory. But, I don't know. And then you can take your oscillators and ring them against each other over here as well. So we could be running... Actually, I won't bother doing it that way. We could be running... and then ring modding them against each other again, because you can never have too much ring modulation. Then you can run as a full stereo synth. At least I think that's what this does. So take your time to perhaps go through and learn what these things do. Again, you can FM things, you can add noise in and what have you. It's... Take your time. Take your time. So we've got these two filters. One always goes to the wave shaper. So filter 1 goes to the wave shaper, which then goes to filter 2. It's the way it always works. You've got the ability to cross them. You've got the ability to assign specifically to a filter or both filters or whatever. Read the manual. It might seem fiendishly complex, but if you ignore what you don't understand and work with what you do understand, you've got plenty. And then when you go, what's this really about? You've got plenty more. So you're winning. So remember, these ones, they appear with a little number over here. They're different filter shapes. Again, the manual hopefully explains what they are. We'll turn off these other oscillators because we've got quite digital source coming in. We'll just turn that back up to... Nice sounding filters. Yeah, if you're technical, they're digital, but they're nice sounding filters. I remember with Short Circuit, and these are basically the same filters as Short Circuit, I remember with Short Circuit feeling that they were probably the closest that I ever found to the filters in my EMU Emaxes. I had a 1, which was a Curtis, and a 2, which were pure digital. But EMU's digital filters were always like, they were the thing. And I felt that Klaus's models they felt the closest to it. I'm not saying they were good emulations of, but they had the kind of musical feel, that nice feel that EMU's filters have. That's a nice thing to say about a man and his filters. So different types. It says that they will self-oscillate. I'm not convinced that's 100% true. I'm happy to be shown that I'm wrong. They'll howl, but I haven't noticed one going to true self-oscillation. But common, most digital synths don't. And you honestly don't need it. Just get a bloody sine wave. Nice high passes. You can get that nice nice talky effect with them bandpass. These are nice. I used them on something the other day. I can't remember what. Worked beautifully. A notch. Cascaded a notch into a low pass. Very nice string sound, beautiful. This thing, comb filter. Okay, that's what that is. So positive, negative, and something else. So it looks like a positive, a negative, another positive, and another negative. Haven't used one yet, so I can't say how I felt about it in use, but most of his other filters sound great. This thing's a sample and hold. I don't know. Use the audio in, put your drum loops through it. Feel like you've done something amazing. I don't know, but it's there. It's not doing you any harm. So we've got the first filter that we go through. It goes to our wave shaper. Actually, before we talk about wave shaper, it took me a little while to find, even though it's got key track written on it, we can choose where we want our key turnover point to be, like our center. So above and below this will be, which way am I going here? Oh, it's sideways, that's why. C3. So in this case, C3, key in the middle, everything above will become more of, everything below will become less of as I raise this. So that's just allowing the filter to open as I go higher and to close as I go lower. Cool. You can then go through a wave shaper. Soft, hard, asymmetric, sine, digi, which I think is just some sort of bastard bit crush type thing. Not a lot of versatility in them, but several times I found, particularly the soft or asymmetric, have added something nice. So I see them as a bonus, and sometimes they really sound nice. That cascades automatically into filter 2. So let's say we did something horrid. That's truly horrid. And we said, yes, okay, I really like my really messed up digital piano. I mean, that just sounds like a synth, doesn't it? So they definitely do have purpose. Don't write them off, but sometimes you won't find what you're thinking you're going to get straight away, but you can definitely run them into another filter. So you can run multiple filters, or if you want just your wave shaper, then you can go straight to doing your wave shaping here and assigning it there. So there's cool, that's a pretty good harpsichord, I'll tell you. So, a lot of options there as to what you can do with things. There's a high-pass filter. So if you've got the sound that you want here, and then you've added more here, and then you go, shit, I need a high-pass filter, you're really not in trouble because you can add it here. A lot to sort through. You've got an envelope generator, which is automatically assignable to filter 1 or filter 2. Now, you can choose with your envelope shapes, like your main envelope shapes, between digital or analog. Digital means that they are just linear. and you do get a good sound out of it, kind of a straight linear thing, but it doesn't sound the same as an analog. So in some situations, the analog shape, which is logarithmic, what have you, some mathematical thing you can see there, swoopy, then makes them faster on the beginning. So depending upon the sound that you're after, that's really rather cool. Obviously not for a TB303 type sound. The way it travels up, I think is really cool. So, while a lot of synths will give you the ability to control every part, it often becomes fiddly, cumbersome, pain in the ass. This is a bit of an either-or, but the either-or work nicely. Between one or the other, I've always got what I want. The envelope times go up to 32 seconds. Sometimes I'd like them to be a little bit longer, but the reality is on just about every synth you're going to find that, and really if your pad needs to fade in over half an hour, you probably want to automate that. It's not really for LFOs or envelopes to be handling. We'll go back to digital shapes, because this is a digital synth. So, brass. Wonderful. Really nice. Really nice. Again, very much digital synth, and I love that about this, because I've got analog emulations up the wazoo. Because, as I said, I spent my whole life going, oh, it has to be like a Jupiter 8 or a Moog Modular. It's like, yeah, I've realized now that that really is pretty bloody stupid. Be open-minded, and this thing sounds like a bit of a workshop of early digital instruments, all in the one box. It's a godsend for me. And when I found it, I was like, oh wow, I ran out to Jane and I said, Jane, guess what? I found the synth I didn't really realize I was looking for. And even better, I worked on it like 15, 20 years ago, and now it's free. So that's basically all of this. Now we get into modulation. This is where synths get interesting. Let's turn off modulation here. Okay. Let's take our let's do one of these. Let's take LFO1 and do some stuff with it. As you see, when you first click something, it just says, okay, here's what we're working on. So let's take this one and make it faster. LFO1, LFO2. So that shows us what we're working on, and we can see that. Initially, it might be a little bit, nothing changes. That's just because they've all got the same defaults, and that's fine, nothing wrong with that. So that shows us what we're looking at. Let's take LFO2. If we click it again, it starts to flash. And you'll notice these go blue. Stars go blue. That tells us that we can now set an assignment amount. I've got two knobs, it's kind of freaky. But the blue one is the modulation amount. The grey one is the bass amount. Now to turn that mode off, I can click again. There are a few other things I can do. This target disappears. You've got no moving knobs here. But you can now hear the modulation. What a lovely sounding filter. It's just gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Do that all day. If you can see this is under modulation because it's got blue on it. We can right click, it tells us what our function is, what our current value is, and now it shows us that LFO2 is adjusting this cutoff by 21.36. We can clear that. Gone. But we can put it back. Positive, negative, lots of it. Easy. Now let's look at the things we can do with an LFO. We've got different, obviously rate. We can change our phase, so where it starts, we can have them free running. So every note I'm playing, you can hear the wub 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 carries on from where it was before. Key trigger means that it triggers for each voice, because these are voice LFOs. We've also got scene LFOs, which we'll get to later. Basically the same. But we can change where our wave starts from. If that means nothing to you, ignore it for now. We can also set it so that phase will start randomly. You can definitely hear it there. Not great for this patch, but superb for pads and strings in particular. So that way, every fiddler in your concerto of fiddlers is actually starting his in a different place. So they're all slightly out of phase with each other, which gives you a really nice fat sound. So each has its uses. We can set the overall output. So if I've only assigned this to one place and I'm going, oh geez, that's a bit much, I can change this. If I've assigned this LFO to many places, then it'll effectively turn them all down. The fact that you've got another control for it is really nice. Deform. So it's just changing the internal phase relationship. Just changes the shape. You can see what's going on. You can have a triangle wave, a square wave. Square waves you generally want to trigger on. A ramp. Oh, I feel so much like Ricky Wilde. That's up there. We're the kids in America. Whoa. Cool stuff. Very cool stuff. Noise. It's a soft sample and hold. If you want the that's there. That's a soft one. So it's nomenclature. We've then got a couple other modes of what that will do. We've got an envelope. So, envelope. Initially, this doesn't look like it's doing anything at all. So the initial setting, while kind of correct, is kind of useless. Hello. One of my worries at the beginning was like, oh god, this thing doesn't have any free envelopes. Everything's going to have to be done by one of these too. No, Benedict, not at all. We've got 6 assignable LFOs, which are per voice. So every time you hit a note, this LFO or envelope starts doing its envelopey thing. You can also tempo sync these. So I can assign them, and now it starts giving me variations of... Some of these numbers seem pretty arcane, I've got to say. They will all be logically correct. I don't doubt any of them, but read them and you'll get your head around them. They're a little arcane. But that's per voice. So you've got access to up to 6 more envelopes, which are pretty versatile envelopes. As well as this thing. Actually, I've got to come back and show you the envelopes. It doesn't make a lot of sense here. So you've got a basic step sequencer as well. And you can move things around if you say, oh, I want to. And that's tempo syncable as well if you are one of those people who can only do things when they're tempo synced. The envelope, I should show you this a bit better. This is why the default envelope generator for the LFOs is always fully open. So that just becomes the envelope shape at that point. That's how this thing gets to do such beautiful sounds. Because the attention to detail you can put into things is really very, very good. So, let's go back here, assign this to overall pitch. Let's give it a lot. I want to start straight away. So you've got quite a lot of control over how your modulations behave, which means that you can really do nice stuff. Really nice, really, really pleasing stuff. If you need it to become unison. And because it's got that grainy, old-fashioned, imperfect sound, those sounds sound so organic. Which is why things like DX7s were able to become so realistic in their own way. And this can give you that feel, and that's a feel that, to me, it's worth a huge amount in an instrument. So, we've got 6 voice LFOs, so that's per note. We've got the same thing as scene LFOs. In other words, they are global. So they're global for this scene. If we move over to the other scene, and we go back, we see they're different. Cool. 2 whole parallel synths. That's a lot of programming, but they are there. And sometimes you go, look, I've used all the bits on this, and I still want something else. Have at it. So these ones are global, which means if we have an envelope, it will be paraphonic. In other words, it triggers with the first note, let's go with the last note. Paraphonic is often a thing that you don't want until you suddenly say, I want that feel of a chord Poly 800, which was paraphonic. In other words, the filters and envelopes and what have you, they had one for all 8 voices, I think it was, on that thing. It was a way of saving money. That's why they were cheap. It could be frustrating in that it didn't behave that way. When you added extra voices, they just appeared inside the existing envelope shape. But largely in that situation, the idea was that you were just playing chords and you didn't notice. But sometimes paraphonic can be really nice. LFOs, if it's a straight vibrato, then you probably would be better off reaching for a scene LFO, global LFO, so that way you've still got these available for envelopes, which are per voice. But you've got the ability to add up to 6 LFOs or envelopes per voice and another 6 LFOs or envelopes per patch globally. That is a lot. It really is a lot. And they're versatile, because remember, each one of these fellas has got your basic shapes. It's got the ability to be an envelope and the ability to be a step sequencer. Get your head around that. That is a lot of power. And there are quite a lot of patches show off some of that power. So, cool stuff. You can then take things like velocity. I can take the velocity. That sort of stuff. There are some things. Oops, not what I wanted to do. Clear all routings. Some things I found strange, and I may have been wrong, but mod reel. Let's take mod reel and assign that way. Okay, now it is working. Sometimes I found it seemed to work backwards. One I know does work backwards. We'll clear that. Is velocity. Doesn't matter how hard or soft I hit this key, nothing happens. And yet the slider's all the way up. What's wrong? Look at this. It becomes negative numbers. So if I put it all the way down, now it works the way we expect it to. It's something that there has been a little chatter over in the last couple of days. It's unusual. My opinion is that if it's going to break anything, leave it exactly the way it is. It actually makes perfect sense. So velocity is allow you to reduce by X number of dB. Odd, not a killer. Just if something doesn't work the way you think it's going to work, it might well work upside down. Get yourself in the understanding of the logic in which it works, and then you're just dandy. You can access these extra things. Timbre, haven't read it, don't know what it does. These things you can set to an external controller, obviously, or they're just like a macro knob. So I can say, okay, I want to assign this to, let's say we'll assign it to resonance, and we'll assign it to cutoff as well. If I'm not having enough fun with that, I can take myself another LFO and assign that. Actually, no, I can't assign that. Sorry, I thought I could. That's a limit. It is sometimes things are going to be a bit circular. So my bad. You can't actually assign that to this thing. But they're a macro knob. And sometimes it's nice, you can just say, look, I'm going to have one knob do 12 different things. Yamaha have a whole synth with a great big mother of a shiny knob on the front. All that is just one big macro knob. So modulation, really powerful and very much at the heart of any good digital instrument. We're going to Clear all ratings. Well, this we've covered. And outputs, you've got effects sends. We won't get into those, you can work them out. You've got effects units. You've got a lot of the usual suspects. So if we turn off our unison, shift click will turn them on and off. Notice my DSP really isn't doing anything. Got all 8 of our notes there and it just flickers. It's pretty efficient, this fella. It's quite a nice chorus, really is. We put our unisons back on. It's a pretty likable chorus. Sometimes these sliders honestly do feel a bit kooky and a bit to use, but you'll get used to them, and in most cases it's well worth it. We've got delay. Actually, we'll put that in the next slot. You've got some presets, and init just means here's a basic one. Often they're set up though as a send effect. It's got modulation. The amounts are subtle, like you can't get it to do full-on crazy town, but bear in mind, how much do you really need it to do full-on crazy town? A lot of them have this width thing, have to read the manual on it, can't say I've loved it so far, don't really know what it does. Might need to know what it does first. We can set delays as tempo sync or as milliseconds in their own slightly strange terminology. Perfectly accurate, slightly strange. Feedback, again, is a little different, perfectly correct, but the only limit here is that if you've got left and right amounts, it processes them accurately rather than necessarily making them match. But if that's a problem, you can crossfade. That gives you a ping pong thing. You can high and low cut. Which again seem to have nice filter roll-offs. Sometimes high and low cuts on delays and effects and what have you, they're like really cheap, nasty algorithms. But these are generally, maybe cheap, but generally nice workable algorithms. They sound good, that's all I care about. There are sends and returns, haven't played with them yet, and then you can get into master effects. The phaser is nice, really nice. I've turned it off. I've used this is a really nice phaser. And a reverb. They are overall actually quite nice reverbs. the defaults can sound a bit as you rather, because some of the settings are not lovely. Are you going to put Stevie Nicks playing an acoustic guitar through this reverb? Probably not, but it's not the point. The other thing that you've got in here is a conditioner. The frequency shifter I'm not sold on. Vocode I haven't played with. Frequency shifter is a frequency shifter, but it's a bit limited. But if you use it subtly and add a little bit, it actually is quite cool, but I'll let you play with that. The EQ, I've seen better. Doesn't mean it doesn't work, but it's a little... get used to it. So this thing allows you to set thresholds, attack and release rates, your overall output, add more bass and treble, control your width, balance, which is sort of a pan, but not really. You'd have to read the manual exactly what that does. Or maybe that's a widener. Maybe that's what that is. Don't know. Read the manual. The limiter is there. It does work. And in terms of a slightly unruly patch, definitely. Are you going to use it to control your drum bus? Not sure. Try it. But overall, they are good effects, and I've used them more than I have turned them off. So that's really rather nice. Speaking of off, you can bypass certain or all of your effects. So if I feel that maybe I've overdone it just a tiny bit, I can kill them collectively or individually. So while at times the reverb may sound a little metallic, it also sounds quite warm. Depends on how you set your controls. That, boys and girls, is basically it. Oh, there's one more cool thing that it does do. MPE. MPE is the next stage MIDI thing, where you've got a lot of extra information. Only relevant if you're running like a Rolly Seaboard or the like, an instrument or one of those things that kooky next generation keyboardy things. You know what I'm talking about because you've got one or you haven't got one. I don't got one, but you can actually turn that on, so it's going to handle all this extra touchy-feely, new agey MIDI information. Control your mouse behavior. I've tried them. I put it back on classic. Up to you. Try it. See how you go. There is a manual, but as I said, the manual is out of date because some things have been changed a little bit. But most of it you're going to work at. I haven't had the instrument long. It's only been a couple of days. And while I have not entirely fond memories of it from 20 years ago, sorry Klaus, I've got my head around what it basically does very quickly now. It's amazing how much you learn in 20 years. And I am truly delighted to have it. It's a joy of a synth. I will actually add a piece onto the end of this. So after I say goodbye, if you're patient, you will actually hear a piece that's made 100% with this instrument. There is some external effects, just in Reason. Yeah, there's a few things, but mostly it's been driven from this. I've got a pair of bus delay or echo and reverbs, Nothing against the reverbs in here. I have used them in a couple of cases of those instruments that you're going to hear, but I like to have a bus to pull things into the same space. Downside of using a different reverb on every single instrument is that they can all sound like, so the bus pulls them together. That's it, but I am delighted with the sounds that I'm getting. I can get a lot of subtlety into them. That old school digital sort of dirty DAC type sound that comes out of this just lends itself so beautifully to mixing. And detail, organic feeling sounds. I'm not going to pretend the piece that you're about to hear is necessarily your personal style. It's not oompa, oompa, oompa. It's subtle, but I think subtle is great because it shows off what a synth can really do. If you want to drive it into oompa, 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 yeah, it'll do it. It'll really do it. So hopefully this covers a lot of what you might want or need to know about the instrument, basically how to operate it as well. This serves as a very workable manual, and go try the thing out. It's as I say, it's a synth I was actually looking for, and it's just such a joy, and it's an irony that it's one that I worked on and was bent out of shape about, or not sold on 15, 20 years ago, but absolutely sold on instantly now, and it's cost me nothing, but I am paying forward with this video to show other people what an amazing instrument is out there, and I may well do some other things for the community as well. Thank you, and hold on now, and you'll be able to hear a piece which is 100% Surge.